think that was one of the toughest decisions with SwiftUI. Why don't you just forget about sticking to those strict constraints and just trust the design process, like trust the system. So, we ended up getting acquired by Snapchat.
How do you deal with time management? What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. In this episode, we had Mazen Kourouche join us. Mazen is a lead iOS developer who has worked at various startups, including Snapchat, and recently made the jump into indie development. Enjoy the show. I saw that you've worked at like big companies and also at startups. What's like the biggest difference you've seen?
I mean, even between the companies, there's a difference. So I worked at a consulting firm at the beginning. So when you're working at a consulting firm, it's like way different to working at a product-based company, so one of the ones that I worked at was Snapchat. But at a consulting firm, you're like bouncing between projects. There's like a new project every 3 to 4 weeks, there was actually one project that went for like 6, 7 months. It was a really long one. So we were building a digital bank from scratch. So we kind of started blank screen all the way to production. That was a really long project. But yeah, so that's like the consulting side of things. And then when you're working for a product-based company, you're working like really fast iterations on more like one feature or one side of the product. And then startups, you're just like you're like bouncing everywhere. Like 1 second you're working on this feature, then a new screen, actually scrap that screen, let's work on this one, new feature. So it's kind of like a lot more chaotic in a startup environment, but I think there's a lot more freedom as opposed to a more organized structure. But obviously, like it comes with its pros and cons. It really, depends.
What was your biggest challenges with those?
So companies or startups?
No, with Well, I guess first I would ask, which one was your favorite? Like which environment did you like the most?
That's a hard question. Like I said, each of them has their pros and cons. I think I'd have to say startup. Like startup is just it's really fun, very fast paced, and I think if you're up to that fast pace, you're just like, let's just get these features out. This is really cool, and you get to try out new tech. So like on a startup, I think you don't have the pressure of having to stick to consistent technology that you just know works. So when we were working on a startup, we would implement AR, we would implement machine learning, AI, anything that we thought would stick or like we would want to test out. So you would just throw those features in there and like, let's see if it works. Whereas I think you're kind of governed a bit more in a larger company.
And what role did you have at the startup?
So at the startup, I was the lead engineer for iOS. So lead iOS engineer, and then we had a backend engineer as well working on the project. It was actually just four. I think 4 of us or 5 of us at any point working on the project. Super small team as well.
Yeah. Did you stick like with iOS, or did you also venture out while you were working there? Since at the startup you have so many different projects going on.
Yeah. So you mean within the startup?
Yeah, within the startup. Like, did you basically deal with any other tech stacks or something like that? Like maybe React or something?
No,
Because
I didn't actually touch many other tech stacks, but I got a lot deeper into the design as well. So I was working really closely with the designer and the PM. So I was doing a bit of like iOS design work and iOS coding. But I was like, you know what, just leave all of that side of the stack to the backend devs. Honestly, I had no idea what they were doing. So I was just like, you know what, I need this endpoint. Get it done, please, for me. I have no idea how you're going to do it, but I just need it.
And what was the startup building or trying to build?
So basically, it was we started the project early COVID period. So it was kind of when all the schools in the US shut down. So we kind of like took that to a virtual environment and built 3D schools. So you can basically sign up, select your school, and then interact with your classmates and your grades within like a 3D world.
Oh. What was it called?
So it was called H.A.G.S, H-A.G.S, so have a good summer. And then they kind of like branched within the US schools, which was interesting because I'm from Australia, so I had no idea like all these terms they were using, like freshman, sophomore, college. I had no idea what anything was. But I was like, you know what? You tell me what to build and I'll build it.
Wait, what terms do you guys use?
So
Or like,
like, you guys use grades, right? You say like first grade, second grade, things like that.
yeah, first grade all the way up to 12.
Yeah, so we have up to 12. Once you get to like, so first grade to sixth grade, we call primary school. And then from 7 to 12, we call secondary school. So it's just primary
Ah,
and secondary. And then after that, I think you guys call it college, we call it university.
yeah,
But
yeah. We do a little bit of both. Like we call it both,
yeah,
to be honest. I don't think we have a like it's a set way we call it.
but then do you guys have like names for university? I think the names come in university or like,
That also depends because like some places are like the University of Florida or something like that, University of Miami. Then there's also
yeah,
like the College of something, but university
yeah,
is
yeah,
more official. I feel like I think like
yeah,
the
yeah.
top schools in like our country or whatever they have university, I believe.
See, but even till now, I still don't know what a freshman and a sophomore is or like any of that stuff.
Yeah, and the weird thing is we use those and for high school and also for like university or college.
Okay, so it's sort of like a stage that you're in, depending
Yeah.
on where you're at. It's like contextual.
Yeah, because it's like 4 years. They assume 4 years for both, like for high school and 4 years for college or university.
Yeah,
And depending on what stage, you get that name.
yeah,
All right, so back to the startup though. So you
yeah,
guys were focused on like 3D education, right? You said
yeah, yeah.
kind of like VR, right? Type, right? Or
We didn't get to that stage, but it was more like you kind of just like it was sort of a first person interaction. So you start off in the school hallway, um, and we had a few cool ideas of like being able to share lockers, and make your locker your sort of like your profile, so people can visit your locker and learn more about you. But we had these cool things where you would be able to just walk around the college hallway and then sort of react live to people. So you would go up to someone and you could like heart react to them. Um, and it was like really chaotic because you would see the animation was like it was like the particle effects, and it would just send from one person to the other, and you could like chat within those. And then at some point we introduced like mini games where you could play games against each other and have leaderboards. It was kind of cool.
that's very interesting. So it's kind of like a game then, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't educational. It was more of a social, like a social networking space, but within your school. So it's like you interact with the people that are in your grade or in your like in your school and get to know them. Because at the time, obviously, like I said, it was COVID, so people weren't interacting in person. So like, let's kind of replace that with a virtual interaction setting.
And how early did you join? Were you there at the founding or?
I wasn't there at the founding, but I was there. So right after it was started by a friend of mine, and one of his friends. So they started up the app, and then it actually started off as a yearbook app. So it had no 3D in it, and it was like, since we don't have the ability to get our yearbook signed, let's create a virtual yearbook. And it kicked off like that, and then they got VC funding, and that's when they reached out to me and were like, you know what, we got funding, so do you want to join? I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Oh wow. When did that shift happen from yearbook to 3D?
It was quite some time ago now. I'm thinking it was probably like 2020. I think it was 2020. Yeah, I think it was like early to mid 2020, if I'm not mistaken. It was so far back now. But yeah,
Yeah, so where were you working when they offered you that, by the way?
so when they offered me that, I was still at the consulting firm. So I was working at Deloitte.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. So actually, when I was there, I ended up like taking some time off to work with them for like, I think it was a few months. And I was like, okay, let's just get some stuff done. So I was kind of like contracting at that point. Um, and this was still like yearbook period. Now that I'm kind of, you're jogging my memory now.
Yeah.
So end of like the yearbook period, they were kind of like, can you do a bit of work? And it was sort of like a bit of contract work. Um, and then they were like, you know what, we got this funding, we kind of want to go all in. And that's when I left my job and joined the
Ah,
startup.
was it scary or were you all for it? How was
Yeah, it
that
was,
like that transition?
yeah. 100% it was scary because like you go from stable income to like it was still stable to an extent because like, you know, it's still sort of like salary based, but it's a startup versus a established corporation that's been there for years, obviously like leading the industry. But I think like the way I look at it, or at least for me, I'm still young and it's still early days, and I want to get that experience. And also, I feel like at least, like I said, at least for me, I feel like that time is limited where you have to explore. You might get it again later in different years, but I'm like, you know what? I'm still early on. I jump into this, and get as much as I can.
Yeah, and it worked out really well, right?
Yeah, it worked out well. Worked out well. We ended up getting acquired by Snapchat. So that was end of 2022. Yeah, end of 2022. Um, Ended up getting acquired by Snapchat because Snapchat was bringing in like, you know, the 3D avatars, and they
Yeah.
had their own sort of 3D space. And so we ended up joining on that side of the team. So we kind of worked on bringing pretty much the knowledge that we had from there to that engineering space. We actually joined a team of design engineers, which was like a new sort of new section in the team where you kind of get a bit of design and engineering, which is kind of cool as well.
Yeah. Dang, well, there's a lot of things I want to hit there. Before we talk about design engineer though, how was that period of getting acquired? Like, did everything come to
For
a halt in a way, or is it like what's gonna happen, right? Or what? How was that experience?
Yeah, so it was like, I mean, it was kind of interesting because at that point there were actually like, you know, conversations with multiple companies um, to acquire the brand, and then obviously us as a team. So it was like, where do what do we do at this point? How do we go about this? It was kind of really, it was a bit chaotic, I would say, from like our side because we're a small team and we have a product, and we're like, all right, we're getting acquired now. What do we do? We have a really cool product, and then we're joining a new team. Um, and also, there was like a few people on the team, so obviously each person had to go through their own stage, and you still have to go through a set of interviews because they're acquiring the whole team. So we're still working on the product in case it like the acquisition doesn't go through. Um, but then also preparing for interviews in case it does go through. So but it was good because you're not doing the interview on your own. It's not like you just applied for a job. We kind of had, it was more of a team effort. So we all had our interviews at similar times and we're kind of practicing together, um, helping each other out. And then you're just like, as soon as it finished, you just get that text. It's like, how was it? Did you do well? How'd the interview go? Do you reckon they liked us? Are we getting it? Are we getting acquired? Is it happening?
Wait, that's so interesting. I didn't know that they did that. So they interviewed everyone on the team before
Yeah.
the acquisition to see if it would be like a good fit.
So they were keen on the team. So they were keen on the product, and wanted to acquire like the product, but obviously they want to make those, you know, like double check, make sure everything sort of ticks the boxes with each of the employees.
Mm.
Um, I guess coming from like a larger company, sometimes like imagine the team was like 40 people. You obviously can't, or at some point you don't want to kind of bring everyone in. So then it's more of an interview of how many people do we bring over, and those are kind of obviously deeper discussions that you'd have on a corporate level. But yeah,
Yeah, how big was the team at that point when you guys got acquired?
at, at that point, I think it was about four of us.
Oh, just four?
Yeah, it was
Dang,
super small team.
dang, that's crazy. One thing you mentioned was about design engineering, right?
Yeah,
Which it kind of mixes designing and engineering.
it's an interesting team because I think one of the biggest difficulties I feel we face in like our tech space is engineers talking to designers,
Yeah.
and that kind of clash, right? So when I worked at Deloitte, that was a really interesting dynamic because we were a team of designers and a team of engineers. And so I would have to discuss things and kind of relay them to a designer. And the funniest part is you would, like, I'm sure a lot of engineers listening would know that you kind of receive something from a designer and you're like, whoa, that I'm not going to build that. Like, um, so the team of design engineers was a bit different because there was a lot more leeway, and you are the engineer and the designer at the same time. So this team is like really explorative. Come up with a crazy idea, but prove it to us real quick, show us that it works, and we'll look deeper into it. So let's say you come up with a super crazy idea and it's like, you know what, I want to incorporate VR into like the 3D Snapchat space, for example. And you're just like, okay, I have this idea. I know I can make it happen. You kind of like do a rough pitch and it's like, cool, build it, come back in a week, show us what you got. So you would just go and like kind of hack away at building this 3D world and maybe like SceneKit or something, bring in some avatars and show what this world looks like, and then present that to your team. And then I designed it and engineered it at the same time, but I was also like designing, I was sort of engineering, I was designing at a pace that I could engineer,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So I would only design what I could engineer within a certain period of time.
Would you say that improved your design skills?
Yeah, 100%. Because then I'm also getting like really deep in Figma and like other design tools. Obviously, like there's other design tools for like 3D space. I forgot the name of one of the tools, but we're using like this 3D. It's sort of like Unity, um, and you sort of play around with the design tools as well as the development. And a lot of the time, your prototypes are obviously in Figma instead of on iOS. But one of the cool things was like SwiftUI was getting very popular, and SwiftUI I think is a really, really good prototyping tool. And so we kind of like it's a bridge between Figma and UIKit. Like UIKit was you could never prototype in that. I mean, I'm sure people who are really
That's
skilled
it'd be very
maybe,
time
but
consuming.
yeah, especially with auto layout and constraints, like
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. But with SwiftUI, because you got like built-in animations, and the animations interpolate, like you can kind of like match geometries. You can animate between screens and make cool effects in record time.
Yeah, that's something that I've really come to appreciate of SwiftUI now, especially now that I have a few projects under my belt using it. I was
Yeah,
reflecting the other day about, dang, if I was doing this in UIKit, this would have been taken so much longer because you have like the auto layout constraints and you have more control, but that comes with you have more responsibility and more stuff to do in UIKit. Where now with like SwiftUI, they kind of give you that UI for free, and it's a lot easier to
yeah,
use.
100%. Like I like what you said, like with the whole like you have more control, but also there's a lot more responsibility. I was really hesitant at the beginning when SwiftUI came out, and I was still at the consulting firm around this point, and we had this team lead join the team, and he was crazy about SwiftUI. He loved it, and he was like, I want to run courses here, I want to run little sessions for all of you guys, I want to show you how to use SwiftUI. I was still really skeptical, and my biggest contention with SwiftUI was you don't get pixel perfect design. At least that's what like my thought process was at the time. Whereas with auto layout, you have like the margins. You've pinned it to either side by 12 pixels or 16 pixels. And he's like to me, he's like, the thing is with SwiftUI, why don't you just forget about sticking to those strict constraints and just trust the design process, like trust the system and let it do the
Yeah.
work for you. And I was like, you know what? That's like a cool way of thinking about it. And since then, obviously, I just went all in on SwiftUI, and now I trust the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, SwiftUI is pretty dope. It's pretty dope. And back to the design stuff though. What advice would you have for people who want to improve like their design? Because especially, like as you said earlier, like as an engineer and a developer, your design skills may not be the best, like me included,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
what do you suggest or recommend?
So I think from like two perspectives, I would take this from two sides, UI and UX. I say this because I'm super passionate about the design, right? Like I get really into it, and I want a clean design. I think when it comes to the UI, learning the tools is essential, right? So like learning a tool like Figma and having that under your belt, even though you're a developer, especially if you're working on side projects and things like that. But it comes in really handy when you want to test something out without having to get into code. I find the biggest issue I have is when I'm trying to design in code, it takes a lot longer. And I'm also making so many revisions, like back and forth. No, this doesn't work. This works, this doesn't. And I just feel like it's just not working. It doesn't look the way I want it to look. It's just not right. But then when I design first, I kind of get it, let's say, for lack of a better word, pixel perfect or exactly how I want it to look. And I translate that over to a design, like into code. It ends up working out a lot quicker and the design looks so much cleaner. And that's from like a UI perspective. And then from a UX perspective, I would look into like the human interface guidelines, especially if you're developing for iOS. I like that was one of the things that I read. I kind of like read through that every day. I'm not saying like you should do that, but I would really look into it and actually read through that. Sticking to those guidelines, because I think one of the things we forget is these companies have done research for years. Like this has happened from iOS, the original iOS, all the way till now. Like that's been compiled and improved over time. So it's sort of like instead of reinventing the wheel, the work's been done for you. So reading through that helps. If you want to know how to structure, like your navigation stacks, just read through that. There's best practices for how to navigate between screens.
During that time that you're reading every day, was there anything that like kind of surprised you or shocked you?
Surprised, maybe like surprised or shocked wouldn't be the best word for the feeling I had, but
Yeah.
I think I noticed a strong consistency within Apple's apps after reading the guidelines. Like you kind of feel it and it's just natural. But then when you read the guidelines, you're like, all right, wow. So there is a formula to this. There is a strategy that they're following in how they do things. And when you go to like other apps, you feel the inconsistency. And then you look at the human interface guidelines and you're like, oh, there it is. It's because it doesn't follow this structure. One of the things that I like early on, I took from the H.A.G was navigation. That's why I mentioned that one. But like knowing when to present a modal and when to push into a navigation stack, I think like a lot of like there is a formula to it. There actually is a way you should do it. And just like popping up a modal all the time because it looks nice and it's pretty and it's like cool little sheet, it's not the right way to do it. And I found like a lot of companies just wanted to do that. It's like, oh, just present a modal. I'm like, dude, you can't
Yeah.
present a modal. You're going to break the flow. It doesn't work. It doesn't fit the guidelines. But then also, like, you can't be too strict. That's the other thing. Like, there is some room to play around with that. You need a bit of that creative freedom.
Dang, I need to look into that then, because I don't know like I haven't looked into that part of what specifics you should consider if you're gonna present the like a navigation or a modal.
Yeah, yeah. I had like a team member back in like when I was at the first company I was working at, and they presented this UI they presented this UI that had a lot of stages. There were a lot of screens, so it was an onboarding flow, and you've got like 10 different screens because we needed ID, like verification, SMS verification, like a whole bunch of things. And one of the suggestions was stacked modals, and I was like, no, 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 no. They like wanted like a modal presented over a modal over another modal. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
closing like 7 modals. I'm just like
Oh yeah.
present one, navigate through that stack. Once the whole flow is finished, just close that one modal and it's finished. It's like once you get the hang of it, you notice like the apps get so much cleaner.
Yeah. So that's some homework for me then, and maybe it's to some of the listeners. Then I'll review more of the guidelines and figure out how you want your navigation.
I still read through it till now. They change it all the time, especially like with new platforms. I haven't read through the Vision OS one. I haven't even started developing for Vision OS yet. Have you played around with that?
No. I mean, I just launched it on the simulator, but I haven't developed anything specifically for it.
Do you have any plans?
Do I have any plans? Maybe not right now because I'm working on a few other projects, so I don't want to put too many things on my plate. Eventually, I will. Eventually, I will. I probably need like a good idea or like an
Yeah,
inspiration, right? Like an idea that'll inspire me to go play around with it.
Yeah.
What about you?
I want to. I really wanted to when it first came out. And but I have this problem where I put too many things in my plate. Maybe I got to get some advice from you on how to not do that. So I kind of like I stacked on 40 things, and then obviously when I realized it was too many things, I just started knocking them off one by one. Vision OS was one of them. I'm like, this is really low
Yeah,
priority. It's like a really, really nice to have, but not a must have.
yeah, yeah. Especially since I mean it's still fairly early, which might be a good
It's
reason to
fairly
go
early, yeah.
into it, right? Because there's not that much competition. But like the device isn't even out yet, and the price
Yeah.
point is kind of crazy.
I think like my goal is to have an app on Vision OS at launch, but I think I still have enough time for that.
Oh, that's a goal. Wait. When is Did they announce a specific date, or I think it's just early next year, right?
Yeah, early next year. But honestly, like I hope I'm wrong. But with devices or at like products like this, I feel like they always get delays and then end up further in the year or like even the next year after that.
Yeah,
As in the video, if you watch the ad for like the Vision OS or the Vision OS video, or the Vision Pro, that's what it's called. If you watch the ad all the way to the end, there's like a disclaimer that says it's sort of like we want it to be at this time, but also this isn't FDA approved or yeah, I think that's what
yeah.
I don't know what it is in the States, but apparently it's not
Yeah.
approved yet. So like if that gets delayed and then approvals don't happen, and then you can guess the rest.
Oh wow, I didn't even know the FDA had to approve that.
Is it the
That's
FDA
crazy.
or is it like
It might be
maybe there's something else? Yeah, it starts with an
S-
F.
some corporation. Um, and speaking of devices, though, is it true that you camped out for the iPhone 8, right?
I was hoping this question wouldn't come up. I did, yeah, I did. I camped out for the 6, 7, 8, 10. I don't think I did the 11.
Yeah. How were those experiences? And like, how early did you camp out?
The earliest I camped out was 11 days. So that was for that. Honestly, that was a buzzkill. That was a really sad moment because that was supposed to be the iPhone 10, and then it ended up being the iPhone 8. That was the year we had two launches, two iPhones.
Really?
So I camped out in September because September was like the normal iPhone launch. And they ended up releasing the iPhone 8 in September and then the iPhone 10 in November. So it was, well, back then because it was the X, and that was really sad because I was hoping for the 10. It was a big launch. I camped out a really long time. Um, but it's cool. Honestly, it was something I did. I did it in my young days, enjoyed it. The Apple staff is really friendly. Like they're really friendly. They mind my seat, and at the time I was still studying, so I would like in like the Sydney Apple store. It's 3 floors, so I would go to the third floor, take my laptop, sit on the computer, and I can still see my chair from the window because like glass windows. I can kind of see my seat, and then I would just keep watching to see if anyone new joined the line. And I'd be doing my
Yeah.
assignments and like my uni assessments while I was in the Apple store. And they're really nice though.
Wait, did you sleep there or did you just have the chair there?
Oh no, I slept there. Yeah, I slept
Ah,
there. Um, I would have like little breaks, so I would like call a friend and like, can you just come and watch my seat? And I would come sit in my seat. I'd go home, have a shower, and come back.
dang. And how many did a lot of people join you or?
For the first 5, 6 days, no one came, so it was just me. It was a bit lonely.
Yeah.
But then on like a few days, I think it was like 4 days left, a few people started to join, and then the line got bigger and bigger.
Ah. Do you think you'll do the same for well, you guys aren't getting Vision OS in Australia, right? Or Vision Pro, sorry.
Uh, yeah, I
Uh,
don't think so. At least not at the beginning.
so you got to come and camp out here and fly to the US and camp here.
The only thing is, I don't know if anyone will camp for it because of how expensive it is. That's
Yeah.
the only other. That's the
yeah,
only
with,
other thing.
yeah, with that price point, you probably could afford somebody Like if you're buying one, you could probably afford to pay somebody to wait in line for you.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting because at the time, um, so camping for the iPhone was cool because they had like really big shortages. And I can't remember what it was, but there was some international thing going on where some countries wouldn't get the iPhone until a few weeks later. So people were like, I think you can read up about it. So there's something on there, but people would buy the iPhone in countries that got it first and then sell it to the other countries that didn't have it yet. So there would actually be people coming from other countries and lining up. Um, I can't remember which countries they were, but they were sort of like in the Asia region, and they would
Yeah.
all fly they would fly in, and you could see them coming in droves, and they would like line up for the iPhone, and you knew that like I would ask them, and they would say, "Yeah, I'm getting the iPhone. I'm going back home. I'm buying like two, three, four, five." At that point, Apple started putting a cap on how many you can buy in like one purchase,
What was the
or like
cap?
per Apple ID. Eventually, they made it two, so now it's you can only buy two iPhones at a time.
Yeah, and I've heard that that's a thing where not just in terms of availability, but also price. Like in some countries,
Mm.
Apple products are ridiculously priced. Like I saw
Is that
on
still a thing?
yeah, like I saw on Twitter, like in Brazil, if you want to buy a MacBook, it's like the equivalent of like $6,000.
Oh wow.
Where like if you like, and this is like the MacBook Pro, which is like maybe like let's say the M1 Pro is $2,000, and in order to buy it in Brazil, you have to pay the equivalent of 6,000 US dollars. So what people do is like they just take a trip to like the US and like they buy it here.
It's cheaper than buying it there,
Yeah.
and you get a
Yeah,
trip
like
out of it.
yeah, that's literally what people were saying on Twitter, so it's crazy.
There's so many things I feel that are like that, where you could travel to a country and get the product like for the same price or even cheaper than if you were to buy the product in your own country.
This is crazy. Doesn't make sense. I guess it's like taxes and tariffs, right? Something like that.
Yeah, that's probably it.
And so why'd you stop camping out for the iPhones?
I think I grew out of it. Like,
Oh yeah.
um, but I did it enough times. I think like I did it a few times. I got it out of my system, and then I started applying for jobs. So I was like, maybe I need to keep a
Yeah.
professional like look on that. I even made videos because at the time I used it to grow my YouTube subscribed account, or if you want to call it. So I kind of grew my YouTube through that. But then when I started applying for jobs, I unlisted all of my videos.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm only going to put the educational ones because I did unboxings and tech reviews, and they were okay. So I left those ones up there. But then the whole camping out thing, and I think back then companies were a bit more like they cared a bit more about that stuff. Now I think a company will look at that and be like, oh yeah, he's got determination, dedication. That's what we need on our team.
Yeah. Yeah. What about like for releases now? Is it all online or like do you order
I
online first
don't.
and then go?
Yeah, yeah. You order online. What's funny though is when I lined up, I had already pre-ordered as well. So
Oh.
I so I only lined up for the experience, not to get the phone
Yeah.
first. But I guaranteed that I would get it first by pre-ordering. So I pre-ordered the device, but now I think it's pre-orders. Yeah, I don't think there's any lining up.
Uh, well, we'll see with the Vision Noah or the Vision Pro. Maybe we'll get some
Yeah,
lines
we'll
for
see.
that.
We'll come back to this.
Yeah. Going back to Snapchat now. You mentioned before like when Snapchat acquired your company, you were still working for them, right? You still work for Snapchat? But you're working from Australia.
Yeah, so when they acquired the startup, and then we ended up joining like as employees at the company.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
so I'm working from Australia. Yeah.
how was like that? Because you mentioned to me offline that you were working like US hours from Australia.
Yeah, my team was really good though. So they kind of knew obviously I'm not going to be able to make every 3 1 a.m. Meeting. But it kind of worked interestingly. Like so I would try work hours that teed up a bit more with the US time zone, but a lot of the time like most of my hours are normal hours for me. But what worked really well was the kind of offset in days because Australia happened like comes our day starts first and also finishes first. I would like I would already have a whole bunch of stuff like ready for me to pick up on a Monday, while it was still Sunday for everyone else on my team. So I would kind of like get a whole Monday that was meeting free, interaction
Yeah.
free to do all my work, and then give all my updates from like Tuesday to Thursday.
Well, that was your most productive day then?
Yeah, Monday was my most productive day. It was funny because like everyone was obviously posting on social media like, oh, Monday-itis and Monday again. I loved Mondays. Mondays were great.
And how was so what was like a daily schedule for you, or your daily?
Yeah, so I think a daily schedule for me was more like I kind of get up and then sort of look at. So from a work perspective, I would have a bunch of things left from the day before. So like a bunch of work messages because obviously their time zone finished later. So I get a whole bunch of those things, tasks, tick off a bunch of things from those, so from sort of like small tasks, or
What
like
time
have a
did you
look at
start?
emails. So I would start around 7 a.m. I would go through emails, Slack messages, and kind of just see if there was anything like outstanding. And then I would kind of get deep into like designing. So I would sort of start off my day with design. Design is a bit more chill. I wouldn't get into code real quick. I'm like, let me just go through some of the designs, make some tweaks, see if anything needs updating, especially if like I kind of got messages about design or like design feedback, criticism, critique. So I'd go into that, and then around lunchtime, I'd have my lunch, and then I'd come back and dive into the code. Then I would work until like maybe like 4 or 5. So I'd get about 3 to 4 hours on code, and then a couple hours on design, and then obviously the other time was sort of going through and doing all the other admin stuff that you got to do.
What shifted you to leave Snapchat, by the way?
Honestly, that was one of the toughest decisions because it was such a good company to work at. Um, but I've just had this like, what do they call it? Like, uh, I've had the indie bug for like
Yeah.
a really long time. From like when I was back in university studying, I was always building side projects, and also like I love making videos on YouTube, a whole bunch of like the side project stuff. So like I would always have a side project, if not like 12 at one time. So I would just be like working on a bunch of stuff. And so I was kind of like, when I'm working at Snapchat, I kind of got it was sort of like a startup in a big company environment. I guess that's the best way to explain it. So I got a lot more of the tasting new technologies, playing with all of the cool stuff. And I'm like, you know what? What if I could just do this all day, every day? And I was like, you know what, mate? Like it wasn't a quick decision. It took a bit of time, obviously, because like I had to sort out like, logistics. How am I going to make an income? Obviously, working on my own and being able to do my own stuff. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to give it a go. I need to try it. And that way,
Yeah.
if I do go back to working at a company, I won't ever say I regret not trying.
Yeah. Was there a particular moment that you realized, oh, you have to do it?
Oh yeah, my wife came up to me. She was like, "You need to leave. You just keep thinking about all this other stuff. Just do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's it." Because I'm always like telling her, oh, I have this cool idea. I want to work on this. I'm doing
Yeah.
this. Oh, I want to record a YouTube video. And then she just looked at me one day and she's like, "When are you just gonna leave? Like, just do it." Um,
Yeah.
so I'm like, you know what? If she's saying it, I
Yeah.
guess let's just do it.
Yeah, that's really nice. From there, how long was like the process of? Because I'm assuming you didn't leave the next day, right? You're not like,
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think it's about a month. Yeah, about a month from then. My team was really nice. I kind of got like they kind of gave me a bit of time off before I left, and also like just have a couple of weeks because obviously like I had time off from work anyway. So I used that time. I was like, you know what, I'll take a couple of weeks, see how I go, and then I did that, and I was like, yeah. I came back. And I said to my manager, I'm like, look, I tried it, and honestly, I loved it, and I'm so sorry, but I got to leave. And then it was about a month of handoff or handover back to my team, and yeah,
how long ago was that?
that was that was the beginning of this year, so January 2023.
Ah, Hey, so
It's not
how's
long
it
ago.
been so far then?
It's been a crazy journey. So many things have happened in such a small period of time. It's only been like 7 months. Um, but I put forward like I kind of set out these goals for myself before I left. And I was like, I'm gonna try all of these things. And I made a whole list. I ordered it from like high risk to low risk. I'll start with the highest risk. I'll get rid of them. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, move on to the next thing. Um, yeah, I've just been enjoying it, man. I like you kind of get a lot of things that you can't get working somewhere else. There's pros and cons. I know some people love one thing over the other, but for me, I think it was something I just had to do to be able to have that time to do my own things, like record my YouTube videos and social media. That's stuff that I enjoy. I didn't really have time for that somewhere else.
And now, what would you say are like your main focus? Is mostly just iOS or?
So I'd like to think that my channel focus, like the channel focus that I want, is more value-based content around software development. Um, so that could be coding tutorials, design tutorials, things like that. For now, I've only focused on iOS because I'm kind of like, look, it's my most skilled area. It's the thing I love doing the most. So I want to start with something that I know really well and I do really well. But I'm keen to jump into design tutorials and then also like web development as well.
You're gonna have a full stack YouTube.
Yeah, but like I don't want to go too deep into areas. I don't want to go too deep into areas that I'm not familiar with. I think I want to sort of like I kind of want to go into the areas that I work with. So like when I'm building an indie app, I will build the iOS application, but I also sometimes need a landing page. And on that landing page, I sometimes need some backend code to like
Yeah.
facilitate some form of functionality. And I think it's cool skills that everyone can use. And it's not like going too deep into another stack.
Yeah, because you could there's a bunch of stuff to learn, right? So you could get you kind of get lost in that where you're just learning one thing and then and then another and then another, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned about the indie landing page, and that sparked like a thought in my head. Like, what's been the biggest challenge, like as being an indie developer?
Oh, marketing.
Marketing.
Marketing is like one of the hardest things. Like I think that's the one thing that I still have no idea what I'm doing with and and like haven't even looked into too much because I've been too focused on either development and stuff like that. I probably should do more of it, like a lot more of it, but I think every developer dreads marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Well, like I had a discussion with another indie developer like a couple weeks ago, and yeah, we were talking, and like that's kind of like one of the skills that we need as an indie developer, well, at least to be like a quote
Yeah.
unquote successful, right? Because
Yeah.
you could build it, but like if you can't market it, then it's gonna be very tough.
Yeah. 100%. It's gonna very, very tough. And it can kind of get a bit lonely because you got like no active users, no one checking out your post, no one like
Mm.
really interested in the app if you don't have good marketing.
Have you looked into any resources?
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. Um, I also find it interesting because like every field that you go into has a different set of marketing strategies. So like indie development for iOS, I find a lot of them focus on like Twitter or X or like Reddit, but then like different applications, people use different platforms. So I kind of haven't gotten my head around that or know exactly where to look yet. I haven't really like looked into it too deep. Have you done some of that yourself?
A little bit, a little bit. Something that I always try to keep in mind is like think about who, like if you want to market something, think about who you're making it for.
Yeah,
Then from there you think about like where are they on the internet? Because of course because you can market in person, but the internet gives you a huge pool of people to market to, quote unquote.
100%. 100%. There's a lot of people that probably want your product, but just don't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so just those two things, and also, of course, like what problem are you solving? That helps you get to the answer of the first one,
Yeah,
which was like who your customer is.
100%.
From my research, those are kind of like fundamental aspects, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't quote me on that.
I,
Yeah, those
I
are just
think,
some things
but
that
I
I've
think
learned
like
along
I've
the
heard
way.
that. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people say that. So I think you're very right with that stuff. Because like there's no point building an app that people don't need, and then also there's no point building an app for a group of users and then not taking into consideration what they need.
Yeah, then that's why that's why you might hear like people say like talk to your customer too, because
Yeah,
like
100%.
let's say you build something like some people like it or find it like somewhat useful, then that interaction with them can help you make it even better. That feedback
Yeah,
is what inevitably, assuming there's a lot of assumptions being made with what I'm saying, but that feedback, like if you keep on iterating, is what makes the app or whatever you're building so good that they start telling their friends, and then that causes like it to grow. And
I think it's always good when you get that traction from like, like one set of users tells another person. Like if it's that, like if it actually addresses, like you said, what problem are you trying to solve? And if your app solves that problem, there are so many people that have that same problem. And I'm sure like
yeah,
two people have spoken about it and be like, dude, I have this problem. It's killing me. One
yeah,
person finds it, dude, I found a solution to it. And then it's like, it's sort of that chain effect. But if you're not really solving a problem or you're like another big thing is like trying to solve five problems at once, right? Like you never really end up solving any of them.
yeah. So you said marketing then has been your biggest struggle.
Yeah, I would say so. I I think I really need to look into that.
Yeah. And how do you? One thing I want to ask too is like, how do you deal with the time management, right? Because now, because I did the same thing as you, right? Like I left my job, going all in indie, and now there isn't anyone in particular. Like when you have a job, you have like a boss and like a responsibility. You have to be working
Yeah,
somewhere from X to whenever. So how do you deal with
yeah,
that?
yeah. Like I try to keep my own corporate environment, let's say, for lack of better words, with myself. I don't have the strict rules as much as like in a job for like set start, set finish time, things like that. I sort of have a standard routine, but in terms of like work, I still use some of the task management tools. Like I use Trello. Um, I've recently been using Ellie, so like to kind of plan my day. So I'll have a bunch of tasks that I need to get done. I use Notion a lot as a tool. I don't know, like I'm not a avid Notion user or kind of like, oh, you must use it. I just use it to kind of throw things in there and say I need to do these tasks. And every day I sort of like assign this needs to get done and maybe like give a rough deadline. Kind of want this by the end of the week, by the end of like January, July. Kind of give myself like some rough timelines.
Mm.
And I'm sort of like every day at the beginning, it's like, okay, these are the things that I need to do. And then I just sort of like tackle those. I don't always get the things done that's on my list because I don't have that, that work environment. I always overshoot and put like 10 tasks when I know I can only do like 7. But I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? If I don't finish all 10, the 3 just move on to the next day.
Yeah, I do something fairly similar. Although I use a lot of pen and paper. I'm maybe I'm old fashioned.
Yeah.
I like to
I
like
actually
map out my
like,
week.
yeah, I'm still a pen and paper. I still got it on my desk. I
Yeah.
still use it. Um, like I have an iPad that I use for design when I just want to like rough sketch. Um, but I don't know, sometimes I like, let me have a look. Sometimes I think I always end up going back to the back to pen and paper. Yeah, we're like, I always end up with paper
Yeah.
sketches of apps. Like I don't know what it is, but like you said, pen and paper just sometimes does the trick better than digital.
Yeah. Yeah, even for like learning and stuff. I've always found it. And I think there might be some science out there. I'm not confirm or anything, but I think I find it a lot more useful when I'm learning or like planning stuff out, just writing it down.
Yeah, I think there is some science behind it, but like you said, I don't know the
Yeah.
details. So I think you're onto something.
And I've seen that you one the biggest project right now you're working on is Be My Chef, right?
Yeah, so Be My Chef is my biggest side project, I would say. So even within my own work, I got side projects
Yeah.
and main projects. So Be My Chef is my biggest side project.
What was your inspiration behind Be My Chef?
So with Be My Chef, I've actually wanted to build a food related app for like a few years now. And I've actually tried to build a few. I've kind of like started, stop, but I was still working at different companies at the time. So I didn't have as much time as I do now. And again, I tried to like address 40 different features at once. Whereas with like Be My Chef, AI came, like the whole AI wave came, and I saw the opportunity. One of the biggest things I faced early on when I was building like a food-based app was I don't have access to all these recipe databases, and I don't have all this information. I actually tried to like I would read through the terms of use for like so many different recipe sites to see if I can scrape their data or use it in some way. I found loopholes, um, but nothing beats like having your own set of data. So when the whole AI wave came, I'm like, you know what? I can kind of like ditch all these third parties and just focus on one feature, which is generating recipes based on dietary requirements. And then you can like leave that part out. Like if you don't have dietary requirements, you can just generate any recipes. And I just went all in with that. And I built this one as a web app actually before a mobile app. So it's actually not a mobile app yet.
So Be My Chef generates a recipe based on my dietary needs.
Yes. So you can like say, oh, I'm like lactose intolerant, or like I've got like I need my food to be gluten free, or I'm a vegan. And then you kind of like you put in you can put in keywords, or you can put in whole recipe names. And then you could also like choose to include or exclude ingredients. So one of the things that I like to do is um, you can kind of like get the link of a recipe, paste it in, and say I want it without these ingredients, or I want this recipe, but I want it vegan, and it will just generate that for you.
And right now it's only a web app, you said?
Yeah, right now it's only a web app.
Do you have plans for the iOS?
Yeah, so the iOS app is in development, but there's about 2 to 3 features that I have that I want to kind of get into that iOS build, and that's like I want to have additional like requirements, sort of like macros, people that want to hit like calorie intakes, and then also be able to see the nutritional info for each recipe. Because right now it's just like ingredients and steps or like instructions. But it'd be cool if you can see like the fat, protein, calorie content of each of those recipes per serve.
Yeah, and so interesting idea that came to my head. And you don't have to take this if you don't want to add more things to your plate, but if I can take a picture of my fridge and based on the ingredients in the fridge, it'll generate a recipe. Like that'd be an interesting idea.
I just making sure I add it to my plate.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to
No,
because
it's a
it,
cool
it already
idea.
sounds like a lot because you have to that's like photo recognition of a rest like what items are.
You know that won't be too, honestly, that won't be too difficult, I think. I just like trying to think of it now because you could use Vision to take a picture and like scan all the items. You pull out like all the ingredients, and then you just like throw that into the same generator and say, these are the ingredients I have. Give me a recipe. And
Yeah.
the cool thing I think about the mobile app side of things, I mean, I can do this on web, but I don't have any accounts set up. But what I like about the mobile app is it's a lot easier to create accounts, and then you can store your preferences. Because right now, every time you make a recipe or generate a recipe, you have to reselect your dietary requirements. But then it's like if I have an account and this info is saved on my phone, then I can just like it's saved. So every time I create a new recipe, it already knows that info. So that'll streamline that process of the idea that you have.
Yeah. So do you cook a lot?
I enjoy it, right? But I don't have so much time to do it. So I think it's one of the things that I like to do when I actually have time. I actually enjoy doing it a lot.
Yeah, me as well actually. I try not to do it too much. Like I meal prep so I don't have to worry about cooking every day. But yeah, just cooking a nice meal is very, I feel like it's kind of therapeutic, right?
I feel like it is. It is therapeutic, but also very time consuming.
Yeah, that's the downside. Wait, so
And I'm like,
what's your main dish then? Like if you were trying to impress me, what would you cook?
honestly, there's a few. So like, because the thing is, I was actually gonna like, I was just about to get to this, right? The problem when it comes to cooking for me is I have a very, let's say, intricate palate. So I like to cook dishes that have like 400 ingredients in them, and then so it ends up taking so long. Like I don't think there are any simple recipes on the list of recipes I like. I'm trying to think now, like some. Oh, I had a really good one today, a really good one. It's a cream cheese stuffed chicken, but it's like full of flavor. There's like a lot of vegetables, a lot of spice. Um, so I don't know if you're into the spices, but I throw a lot of spices into
Yeah,
my dishes. Um, there's that, but there's one other one. It's a creamy Tuscan chicken with a mango salad on the side. That is one of my favorites. I want to send you the links
and
to
and,
these. So
and you make them?
yeah, I follow
You
recipes
make
off
them
the internet.
yourself,
I don't
right?
come up. I'm not a chef.
Yeah.
I'd say I'm a cook, not a
Hey.
chef. I don't come up with ideas. I just follow the recipes.
Yeah. Hey, if I'm ever in Australia, then I'm gonna have to stop by for a little meal.
Oh, 100%. I love doing that. I actually flew down to, so I live in Sydney, and I flew down to Melbourne to visit a friend of mine. He's also an iOS developer, and so I was kind of like staying at his place, and I was excited because he lived on his own in an apartment, and he's like, oh, let's go out and eat. I was like, no, we're going to the supermarket. I'm going to get some ingredients, and I want to cook you up a nice dish. And I think that he hadn't had a home cooked meal for a while,
Yeah, eating out can get like very tiring.
and expensive.
Yeah, that too. One thing I wanted to bring up was I saw that you won a few WWDC Scholars awards.
Yeah, yeah.
What was your favorite project from those years?
So project that I submitted.
Yeah, yeah. That because
So you know, I
is that
actually,
how it works? Sorry, because
yeah.
I really don't know how that works. How like the WWDC Scholars works.
I haven't looked into it too much, like in recent years. I think it works still the same as it used to. So I went in 2016, 17, and 18. 2016 was actually different to 17 and 18, like the entry requirements, if I recall correctly. So what they used to have as the entry requirements was sort of like present to us a resume in the form of an iOS app. That was like the original, like back in when I first started applying. And you would like use as many technologies as you can, have like, again, try follow the interface guidelines, add animations, things like that. But then the years that followed, they were a bit more free, and it was like just build a Swift UI or a Swift app back then. There wasn't Swift UI. But it's like build a Swift app to showcase the like iOS technologies. So you would use like machine learning or like what other things were there? Like AR, things like that in your application to show off like the skills that you have. But the key to it was how can you incorporate those technologies tastefully without just like throwing them all in there? Because it's like you can throw in all these ingredients, all these technologies, and have this app and show us like what you know, but how well can you build a well structured and creative application for this process? So that's kind of like that's the crux of honestly, that's also for anyone listening and wanting to apply, that's some advice that I'll tell you. Don't just like throw everything in there. How can you craft a really nice app? Um, I actually have a video of my first one uploaded on my YouTube channel, but it's privated. I might like make it unprivate. But my second one I think was my favorite. So my second application, I I think I can't remember exactly what the application requirements were, but I think you had to pick a topic that you wanted to talk about, like some random world topic, and then use the iOS technologies to talk about that and sort of like explain that concept. So I kind of wanted to showcase the evolution of technology. And so I had it sort of, I'm trying to remember what it started off with. Oh yeah, it started off with like a windmill that you would like blow into the microphone to get it to spin. And then
Wow.
as you did that, yeah, so like as you did that, it would move over and you could see the electricity passing into the next thing, which for me was like a battery. And it would like fill up the battery. Once the battery was full, you sort of like accumulated that part. And as I went on through the app, I showed different parts of an iPhone, but you don't know that until right at the end. So like how each of the technologies came about. So like the camera, the battery, the screen, things like that. And then right at the end, you have like this inventory that you've accumulated and you just drag them to build the iPhone. And then once you build the iPhone, it like flashes and is like swipe to unlock. And then it was really creative. I think
Yeah.
my creativity
Yeah,
was
like I would like
bursting
to
a lot more when I was younger.
I would like to use this app. Is there
I'm
anywhere we
actually
can
like,
check
I'm
this
kind of
out?
upset because I'm kind of upset because I don't know where it is. It's on a hard drive somewhere. And also, I think if I was to bring it up, it was built in Swift Playgrounds. So I don't think it's going to work on the current version of Swift.
Yeah, that's why you got to store it in GitHub, in a private repo or something.
I don't think I even knew how to use Git back then.
Thank you for coming on the show, Mazen. Where can the people find you?
So people can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, of course.
Yeah, the links will be in the description. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you guys like, comment, share, subscribe, and consider sending this to a fellow developer. If you want to support the show, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and even consider joining the Patreon.